But I'm so grateful that you want to listen to me tonight, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm very glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, how many people are anxious, concerned, uneaseful, worried, fearful? There's other adjectives, but you know what they are about climate change or global warming. Raise your hand. Okay, that's good. How many aren't? Okay, so can we talk afterwards? I want to know what you know. It's really cool. I'm so glad. It's full. The worry bin's full. Okay. Here's the most important question. How many people think the climate is absolutely perfect? Yes. You all should have raised your hands. You really should have. It is absolutely perfect. It doesn't have any choice in this matter at all, by the way. It is doing exactly what the climate has done for 1 billion years, which is respond and change. Get warmer, get colder, do ice ages, blow everything out, try it again, start over. The climate is perfect. I mean, it is talk about blessings. And when you hear the term climate change, which has become a standard phrase, or coupling of words, the climate is supposed to change every nanosecond, and that's what it does. And it does it so well. And if it didn't do that, we wouldn't have seasons, food, animals, critters, biodiversity, and beauty. The change is what causes that. And so for me, I'm the same person who raised their hand for the first question, and still am to this day, by the way. Every morning I have these RSS feeds and so forth that come in, and I cannot read them at night. I don't sleep well, so I read them in the morning. I can have the whole day to try to integrate and incorporate them. And there's some mornings going, oh no, don't say that. Wait, we're losing our cloud cover. So, no, please, scientists, this can't be true. So you see this incremental expansion of the predictions of what a interesting predicament we have created for ourselves. And but for me, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm an English major. I have for 2 decades now, or more actually, been looking and parsing how we talk to each other about this, the language itself. And for me, it just didn't make sense. And it's interesting because prior to that, the word sustainability was being used everywhere around the environment, and it became what's called a weasel word, which meant it means anything to whoever's using it, however they define it stipulatively, so it had no meaning. And so when people used to ask me what sustainability meant because of the influence of my teachers, I said it means alleviating suffering of all beings. That's what sustainability means. And that took care of that one. Then we could go on talking about how to do that. And but for me, around climate, I felt like what is so beautiful about the way we talk about it is emblematic of the cause. In other words, the semantics or the wordings that we use commonly and the media uses actually tells us what the cause is. And those words are war metaphors and sports. Very male. Fight, climate change. Combat, climate change. Tackle, climate change. The climate crusade Is there anybody here of Arabic origin? Okay. I mean, you might as well say Holocaust when you say crusade. That's a horrific event in human history. And these are the words we're using. Well, what do they tell us? What they tell us is that we are othering a miracle. Climate is a miracle. And we're using language that makes, which the egoic mind does always, which is to make a separation between self and other, object, subject, right? So that is the cause. That's where it came from. That's how we did it. We othered the natural world. We othered Native Americans. We othered other races, racism. We othered religions, Islamophobia. Othered women apparently for at least 2,500 years, maybe longer. I don't know. But now we have Me Too, which is such a humble phrase when you think about it. Just Me Too, right? But all of this is about seeing it as other. And occasionally now, when I'm in an audience, I'll ask people to go like this, and they don't want to do it. I said, no, go ahead, do it. And I said, just close your eyes, just dork out and do it. And they do it. And I ask them, what do you feel? And they go, air. And I said, no, that's the atmosphere. The thing that you're going to tackle. Right? And this idea that we don't influence it, I just did. I exhaled CO2. Boom, I exhaled. So when you understand it and see it that way, the inextricability and interdependence between all these things we name, we label them, but they're inseparable. So whether it's climate, weather, atmosphere, and this miracle we call life, it's the same thing. They're vastly dependent on each other. The biosphere creates climate, climate creates the biosphere, biosphere affects climate, biosphere affects the atmosphere. It's this beautiful dance that has been going on for billions of years. And so Drawdown, the book, when for me was really a plea in 2001 to scientists and NGOs and academics, and what I was simply asking for was, can we just find out what to do? I don't know what to do, and there's no list of what to do and how much it costs and what impact it'll have. And this is when the third assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out, and each one is more sobering than the prior one. And everyone I spoke to said, well, that's a great idea. We don't do that. Why don't you do that? I said, I don't know how to do that. That's why I'm asking you. And there it went. For years and years, I stopped asking. And then in 2013, Bill McKibben wrote a piece called Global Warming's Terrifying New Math. And it did terrify people. It was a good piece. He's a good writer. And people came to me and said, it's game over. Like, I'm going to move to British Columbia, take the kids, whatever. And it's over. It's done. We tried. We worked hard. The people who came to me were those people. And what I felt then was that when people surrendered, there was actually a surrender. Game over. We give up. That it's actually an opening. It's really an opening for consciousness and awareness, because you don't know anymore. And so, as Jack said, I knew that I couldn't do it, even if I could. If you had a white male saying, I know what the answers are, listen up, that would have all the credibility of a lentil, And the only way to create something that had some substance and credibility was to reach out as a community, as a collaboration, so that all the voices are being heard and working together, as opposed to, what we often see now. And I understand their leadership, but I mean, I think that age of the white charismatic male vertebrate is over, and it's, thank you, you've done enough damage. And so we know that going forward, it's not to obviate or to diminish the role of the male so much as to diminish the role of othering, of the male as an identity unto itself. And so that is where the language, the sciences come, the languages come, and so-called actions. And so what Drawdown did is put the word out all over the world to ask for research fellows, Drawdown fellows, and almost half women, 21 countries, every major religion and some minor ones, White House fellows, Khan Award winners, just an extraordinary group of people came forth. And we worked together for 3 years, and Drawdown is the result. But I authored most of it, but I authored it from theses that had been done by these research fellows, 10,000 word theses on each solution. And extraordinary work that they did. They're all half were PhDs, they're postdocs, double degrees, and so they're amazing people. But I was also the editor, which is what it says on the cover. And what I didn't say to anybody, and so maybe I should have, but I didn't, is that the book was a technique. It wasn't just a book. And the first thing is the cover had to have the problem and the solution, both. It can't be just uninhabitable Earth or the end of ice, which is like, yeah, and okay, so number one. Number two, it had to be a collaboration. In other words, so that it had some credibility. Three, no fear, no doom, no threat to motivate. It doesn't work, so it was an easy choice. It doesn't work. We know that from every neuroscientist alive, and yet we still try to employ that as a way to get people excited about things and to do something. Also, no blame, no shame, no finger pointing, no demonization of anyone. The next thing, never say that you're right. Don't be right about anything. Be helpful, share, have citations, but it says right in the introduction, this is not right. We hope it's approximately right. You be the judge. Because as soon as you're right, you've made somebody wrong. So you divide. So next thing is no divisions. Don't divide the world. And again, it's about verbs, about combating, tackling, fighting, and all those verbs, divide the world, divide up. So we didn't do that. And then to try to make it beautiful, in other words, to make the imagery, so that the number 6 solution of educating, empowering girls, is the most beautiful Kenyan girl you've ever seen, standing there with this grin on her face in front of a blackboard, instead of just black and white words about educating girls, factoid, factoid, factoid. We told stories. And facts don't change people's minds, only stories do. Only storytellers do. This guy here. That's why I'm a junkie. And it's like... And
Ramdas said I tell too many stories, but that's it. I said pot in the kettle, we've got a little...
But I think that and there is a couple more too, but the point being is that with Drawdown is like to try to enter into the stream, the river, to enter that river of confusion, of anxiety, of concern, which is very justified, by the way, by the science. So this is not like, it makes sense if you're worried and concerned, of course. It doesn't make sense to be attached to it. That's another subject, right? But so how to enter into that stream in a way that actually was spacious, to create spaciousness for people. And what's happened is that it is taught in every grade level in the United States, from 4th grade, 5th grade, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to MIT graduate school, the same book. The 4th graders cut it up into pictures and then actually dress up as solutions and try to have the friends guess what the solution is and what it does. I mean, that's how they use the book. I have no idea what they do at MIT, but I'm sure it is. And so they'll dress up as a pea and a carrot, peas and carrots. And then they'll say, you have to guess, oh, that's plant-rich diet. Yes, you won. Okay. And so that's what 4th graders do with the book. And I remember somebody asking me once in a talk, he was in the back of the room, and it was being televised, live streamed, but it stopped. It was an hour. And then there were still hands up, and so the moderator called on this person, and he was, I can't even do it to you, but I'll do it here, but he was jabbing his finger at me like this, which is beautiful because it's universally a bad thing to do in every country in the world. I understood it. But he was saying in a very, I will imitate the voice, what do you say to the NASCAR people? Huh? Like, huh? You're talking to the choir here, And he was very confrontive. And I said what I always say when somebody asks a question, which is, what a good question. Every question is a great question. Because if it's genuine, it's a good question, right? And I thought about it. I said I'd probably ask him if he favored Kyle Busch or Chase Elliott for the championship. He looked at me like, why? What do you mean? Why would you say that? I said, the implication of your question that it's my job to change somebody else's mind. And that's not my job. My job is to change my own. And that's hard enough, I tell you that. And so in this movement, this climate movement, so-called, I just feel like there's a quality that comes from practice and from sitting and meditation and sanghas that is remarkably more effective than the activity that is being engendered because it's a climate emergency. It's a climate crisis. And so therefore the amygdala responds and you think, well, I got to do something quickly and it's got to have a big impact. And then you start to feel all that anxiety. And you're off base as soon as you feel it, but you might continue to do it anyway because it's such a big emergency. And the quotes you mentioned, there's a staffer, I know he does notes, I brought notes, I never have notes, but anyway, but there was a beautiful quote from William Stafford, which I love. It's a little, you'll get it at the end. It says, the things you do not have to say make you rich. Saying things you do not need to say weakens your talk. Hearing things you do not need to hear dulls your hearing. And the things you know before you hear them, those are you. Those are why you're in the world. Which is such straight up Theravada, like the one who knows, And from the regeneration, the next book is really about trying to draw out what we do know. We know what to do when we know how to do it. What we have not been called to is to come together in ways that are honoring, respectful, listening based, and it the emphasis is on not the future. And you hear in the last Democratic debate, every single candidate talked about future existential threat. I mean, it's burnished on their cortex now, and it's not about future existential threat. That's just in your mind. It's good science, but it's not a place to dwell. And what regeneration says is, if we're going to reverse this climate crisis, we have to pay attention to current human needs. And that if humanity isn't paying attention, which it's not really, it's because we're not paying attention to humanity. And that if the climate movement isn't directed towards the needs of the vulnerable and the impoverished and the disenfranchised and those who are suffering right now and will suffer more from changes in weather, rain, drought, food, war, migration, etc., then we're not serious about it. This is not a top-down solution. This isn't going to come from the top. I love that people get together every year in 4- and 5-star hotels from 186 countries to meet about it. That's great. And with all due respect to Christiana, who's an amazing woman, nothing is going to happen from that. You can count on it. It's been going on for 25 years, and the atmosphere hasn't noticed yet. And the reason for that is that it has no agency. It's a confluence. Confluences have no agency. You do. You do. All agency comes from an individual initially, and it becomes a dyad and a group and a community and a gathering, and sometimes it becomes like a yatna, a movement. But if I have a few more minutes,
You do?
Just a few more minutes.
Keep going.
Simultaneously to that, I wondered, this is 2001, I wondered, well, where do movements come from? How are they begun? How do they start? And so I want to tell you how the civil rights movement began, because I was a part of it. But so I wanted to sort of follow the breadcrumb trail back as far as it could go to see where it originated. And where it originated, literally, is Ralph Waldo Emerson's father, who was a pastor, giving Ralph Waldo Emerson a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, which, when Emerson wrote that he put it on par with the Bible in terms of its spiritual importance. So Emerson then becomes a pastor, and he marries this wonderful young woman. He's 23, she's 18, and within, I think, a year and a half, she dies. And he is just heart-stricken, in grief, sadness, and his friends say, go to Europe, get out of here, get out of Boston, go there. And he starts in the boot of Italy, and he goes up, and he's meeting Wadsworth and all these amazing people. But then he goes to Paris, and those who've been to Paris near Notre Dame know that just down the river is the botanical garden, but then it was called the Jardin des Plantes. And it was the Jussieu family. And the Jussieu's, before Wallace and Darwin, actually had a way of organizing botanicals and all the pieces and parts that were coming in from all over the world from explorers, so-called explorers. And they had a topology and organized it so that when you went in, you saw this little wing and a bigger wing and wings and colors and so forth. The same with plants. And Emerson went there and he was blown away. You should read his journal that night. It's like, for the first time, he is joyous and he has seen the web of life, and he realizes that all of life is interconnected, interdependent, mutually arose. I mean, he just cannot write enough, and he keeps going and on. And then when he comes back to the States, he writes the book Nature, which is an extraordinary book to this day, by the way, extraordinary. And as soon as it's published, one of the first people to buy it is Henry David Thoreau. And he graduates from Harvard and he goes to Emerson and said, what should I do? What should I do? And Emerson says, keep a journal, which he did for, thousands of pages, like 6,000 pages. But then he builds this little cabin on Emerson's land called on Walden Pond, right? And a friend of mine said, I collect books that were owned by the Transcendentalists. And he said, let me send this one to you. It was over Thoreau's head on the shelf in his cabin at Walden Pond by R. Spence Hardy. It's called A Manual of Buddhism. And it has his margin notes in it. It's like, and we don't know that, but I mean, North Boston, 1870s, was like Boulder. I mean, you could buy mala beads and Buddhas, and you probably couldn't get Buddha bobbleheads like you can now, but I mean, you could get everything at that time. There was this just amazing efflorescence of Buddhism in the Northeast. But it's pertinent because then I think 1846 was it? Anyway, he was walking to town. He was arrested. We know about that. He was arrested by the sheriff of Middlesex County for not paying his poll tax. Okay, he didn't pay his poll tax because the poll tax kept freed African Americans from voting, right? Which is Republicans are still working on that to this day, right? And so he was arrested. His sister brought him some hot chocolate. He was let out the next day. But then he gave a talk at the Concord Lyceum, and with a long name and so forth, and basically saying when the government is unjust, the just person is in jail. And what he did is he took the shame and the ignominy of being in jail and flipped it. He flipped it. And to be something of a badge of courage and a badge of honor. And then 4 years after, that was transcribed, and 4 years after he died, there is this essay of his, the essay that he wrote, except it's called Uncivil Disobedience. He never said the word. He never wrote it. No one knows where it came from to this day. And almost, that was 1866. And then in 1906, this skinny little lawyer in Durban, South Africa, is meeting with 1,000 Hindu and Muslims, and they have decided to basically oppose the Black Act, which is basically apartheid and registration, and they agree to get arrested. And Gandhi goes home that night and says, we agreed to, but I'm going to get disbarred. And I'm just able to practice now, and I'll go home, my family and this, but we've all agreed to get arrested. And somebody from the Durban Times, we don't know when, gave Mohandas Gandhi the essay on civil disobedience. And they got arrested, and he held it up as he went into jail in South Africa. And that is so important because Martin Luther King, when he was appointed the head of the Montgomery boycott. He hadn't really headed it. Joanne Robinson headed it. That was because Rosa Parks wouldn't give up her seat. And why didn't she give up her seat? Not because she was lazy or tired that night, because she had been trained at the Highlander Institute in Tennessee, paid for by Clifford and Virginia Dewar, who are still trying to get poll taxes taken away, even then in 1955, and she learned nonviolence, because Miles Horton studied with Gandhi. And so when she didn't give up her seat, she was practicing nonviolent resistance, satyagraha, which is what Gandhi created. And that's how King got hired and came to Montgomery. And within 2 months, they had blown up his front porch with his wife and children in it, and he went crazy. And he just so upset about it, and he tried to get a license to get a gun. The sheriff wouldn't get it to him, but he had guns in the house. He had African Americans who had rifles. He was armed. And Bayard Rustin came down. Bayard Rustin was the most beautiful, I had a chance to meet him, African, just forget African American, man you'll ever meet. He happened to be an African American, spoke the King's English, was tall, could sing, act. He was just an extraordinary human being, and he was gay. Well, you never sent Bayard Rustin down to the South unless it was really, really important, because he was so vulnerable because of that. And he brought to Martin Luther King, he sat down like this. He sat down and he said, "What's that?" And he pulled out a gun. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm defending my wife and children." And he said, "No, haven't you heard of Gandhi?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of him." He said, and so he got a Methodist preacher there, and he came over and gave him the autobiography of Gandhi and the copy of Civil Disobedience. And that Sunday, you can read that sermon, and that completely changed Martin Luther King's career and way. Why do I tell this story? Because it's not about King or Parks. It's not about Gandhi. It's not about Thoreau. It's not about Emerson. They would be magnificent people no matter what happened. What I'm telling you about, who renamed the essay? We don't know. Who gave Gandhi the essay? We don't know. We know who Joanne Robinson is, but nobody knows her. She was the one who organized the Montgomery bus boycott. She was the one who brought in Martin Luther King. I can name more and more names. What I'm saying is we have so little control, but we do control a couple things. Our intention, our ability to let go, forgive, and to be generous. Those things we can control. And I feel like the way a movement starts is so mysterious that it's not knowable. You can't plan it, but you can embody it. And I feel like what we face in terms of global warming is, if you describe it and get into the science, it is almost science fiction in its nightmarish qualities going forward. And we face 30 years, no matter what we do, we face 30, 40 years of severe changes on the planet. There's nothing we can do about it right now. It's locked in. It's baked. So to Jack's point, who are we going to be? Who are we? Right? And I just feel, and Byron Katie comes here once a year, August, and she has this wonderful flip. It's a prepositional flip, right? And the question is climate change happening to you, global warming happening to you or for you? It's a fair question. Because if it's to you, the object, you're the victim, you're going to blame, you're going to finger point, you're going to say, whatever. But you're going to live in that mind. And that mind is going to see itself as being separate, for one, and therefore impacted and hurt or harmed or potentially in another way. If it's for you, which it is, by the way, it's a blessing. Global warming is a total blessing. Why? because it's feedback. It's beautiful feedback. And any system that ignores feedback perishes. So it is a gift. And if it's for you, then basically you can just take 100% responsibility, stop finger pointing, not blame anybody, and you are free to innovate, to imagine, to generate, to create whatever it is you can do in this world that makes a difference. And you do it not because of you're afraid, but you do it for the only way and the only reason that this is going to be upheld by humanity is you do it out of love. And so the way for me, if you doubt it, it's like fall in love with what's outside. Fall in love with the critters, the creatures. Fall in love with everything you see right now. Springtime is the best of all in some ways, and it's out of that love of the living world, that we achieve transcendence and a sense of like the thing that Stafford said, the thing you don't need to hear is who you are. And what you don't need to hear out there is something that nobody will tell you, but that you are the miracle as well. And as is your heart, and as is everything we do together. And so for me, regeneration is really about stopping degeneration. Come on, let's stop. We've done it. How is it working for us? It's not working so well. And it's about turning around and do that. I could talk more about some other time, but that's the reason I'm a podcast junkie, because I get fed. I need to be fed. I get all the science in the morning, and then I get all the Dharma at night. And I think it's a good mixture. Anyway, I just want to thank you all for who you are and what you do.